How's it going, family? We're carrying on with our story, carrying on with the death of Jesus. Today we're getting into Mark 15, verse 35, and it says, "And some of them that stood by, when they heard it, said, Behold, he calleth Elias." What does this mean? Because this is where the bystanders hear the cry and respond. And it introduces symbolism in its essence around perception, projection, and misinterpretation. The crowd represents the externalized mind, society, inherited beliefs, and conditioned perception, observing internal struggle but interpreting it through their limited framework. They hear the words and speculate, projecting meaning based on fear, expectation, or misunderstanding. This mirrors the human tendency to judge inner processes externally rather than understanding the deep internal dynamics at play. The verse symbolizes the gap between internal truth and outer comprehension. What is profoundly transformative within the self often appears chaotic, confusing, or nonsensical to others. The crowd's response reflects how ancestral patterns, cultural conditioning, and collective assumptions distort the perception of personal trials. The bystanders are fragmented aspects of the psyche that attempt to interpret intense inner experiences without accessing the higher mind. This is what we all, in essence, are trying to reach and access overall. There's a scripture that says, in the book of Revelations, that the children of God are marked on their foreheads themselves. The eye of the inner soul in itself is in the middle of the forehead. Why did David throw the stone into Goliath? And literally into the middle of the forehead. You need to understand the symbolism of all these stories you've been reading all of your life. They've always been fables, stories within stories. Think of tortoise and the hare. And basically people tricked you into learning these stories and taking them literally. I see it as very dangerous when you learn these stories literally. I see the literal religious psychosis that is crippling people in today's society. Very dangerous. This moment also highlights the duality of witness and participant. The inner observer experiences the crucible while the externalized observer misunderstands. Transformation often occurs in contrast to external perception, requiring endurance and inward focus. Darkness and crisis within are invisible to those not attuned, and misunderstanding is inevitable until inner alignment emerges. Ultimately, this verse teaches that personal evolution cannot rely on external validation or comprehension. The symbolism underscores the importance of internal authority, discernment, and patience with those who cannot perceive the depth of your inner process. True understanding and integration happen within, independent of misinterpretation by the outside world. Because this verse in itself reflects the way inner struggle and external perception interact with the human system. The cry experienced internally activates both high and low neural centers. The prefrontal cortex processes the meaning of the event, attempting to contextualize the emotional and physical intensity, while the limbic system amplifies the visceral response. Fear, grief, and ancestral memory surge simultaneously. The crowd represents projections of the externalized mind, triggering additional stress through perceived judgment or misunderstanding. Hearing or imagining others' reactions engages the auditory cortex and associated neural networks responsible for social cognition. Mirror neurons are activated, producing a somatic echo of the observers, confusion or speculation within the individual. This creates a layered bodily experience. The nervous system registers both the internal crisis and the perceived external misalignment. Heart rate, breath, and muscular tension reflect the combined pressure of internal vulnerability and external projection. This verse also illustrates the interplay of focus and distraction in the nervous system. Internal attention must navigate the intensity of the crucible while filtering out the noise of misinterpretation. This teaches the body-mind the capacity for sustained attention and resilience. Ultimately, Mark 15 verse 35 demonstrates that human anatomy and cognitive architecture are deeply responsive not only to internal states but also to perceived external feedback. The nervous system, emotions, and thought patterns are influenced by how one experiences the awareness of others, highlighting the necessity of cultivating internal authority. Transformation requires mastering the ability to remain centered in external projections, allowing integration of stress without reactive fragmentation. Because this in itself, in this verse, illustrates a principle found throughout nature in itself. The observer and the observed are in constant interaction, and perception shapes response. You need to understand the observer and the observed is you at all times. You observe from the inside and you observe into the outside. Just as ecosystems respond to the subtle changes, plants orient toward light, rivers adjust to obstacles, predators sense shifts in prey, human consciousness reacts not only to internal events but also to external stimuli. The bystander's presence mirrors the way external forces in life, society, culture, ancestral patterns reflect and sometimes amplify internal states. This verse reflects the law of resonance. Vibrations, whether of thought, speech, or energy, ripple outward and interact with surrounding systems. The cry resonates through both the individual internal field and the collective field, eliciting response, interpretation, and feedback. Misinterpretation by others mirrors the principle that the universe responds to the level of awareness and perception available. It does not distort reality but reflects the observer's current understanding. The episode also demonstrates polarity and feedback loops. Internal struggle contrasts with external misunderstanding, creating tension that catalyzes clarity over time. In nature, pressure and misalignment often drive adaptation. Storms restructure landscapes, droughts reset ecosystems, and imbalance triggers realignment. Similarly, the crowd's misinterpretation acts as a natural corrective force, forcing the internal system to cultivate discernment, resilience, and independence from external validation. Ultimately, this verse shows that human experience is inseparable from universal law. External observers, societal pressures, and ancestral echoes all act like natural forces, testing alignment and focus. The cosmic principle is that clarity and coherence arise not from controlling others' perceptions, but from maintaining internal attunement, allowing your own vibration to stabilize even amid misunderstanding or projection. Because this verse in itself teaches a practical lesson about handling external perception and misunderstanding during times of personal challenge. Life often mirrors this dynamic. Your internal processes, breakthroughs, or struggles may appear confusing or illogical to others. People will speculate, judge, or misinterpret your actions just as the bystanders did. The verse emphasizes the importance of maintaining internal authority and not relying on external validation for guidance or confidence. This means learning to separate your inner truth from the projection of others. When facing intense personal trials, pause before reacting to opinions, criticism, or misunderstanding. Observe them as reflections of others' awareness rather than assessments of your progress or worth. Practices like meditation, journaling, or intentional reflection help maintain focus on your internal alignment instead of being pulled into external narratives. It also teaches discernment and engagement. Not every voice requires attention, not every perception needs response. The ability to maintain composure amid misinterpretation strengthens resilience, cultivates emotional regulation, and ensures decisions come from clarity rather than reaction. Finally, the verse highlights patience with timing and process. Transformation often occurs silently without immediate recognition from the outside world. The external misunderstanding is part of the natural law of feedback. It tests endurance and reinforces the necessity of internal coherence. By embracing this, you develop the capacity to move forward intentionally, grounded in your own authority and alignment, rather than being distracted or derailed by how your process appears to others. In essence, this verse calls you to internal sovereignty. Stay aligned, endure misperception, and let the outer world reflect rather than dictate your inner reality as a person. And let's take it even deeper as we get into Mark 15 verse 36 in the next segment. And one ran and filled a sponge full of vinegar and put it on a reed and gave him to drink, saying, Let alone, let us see whether Elias will come to take him down. We will decipher this and go through it in the mystical lens and give it a whole new meaning. Till next time, family, stay safe, stay blessed.